I remembered that photo when you gained that prize from the WHO. And who would say that so many, and a very consolidated international. If we could participate, I have a strong admiration for you. I will show some slides on tendencies, or to show some recent work that we've been doing in Brazil and in the world. Can you see my screen? So I'm going to say a little bit of a story here and to say about the things that have come out more recently. I have no conflict of interest. I've never received any financing of the industry. So I can say this as an independent scientist. Our work, like João mentioned, my work in the 80s helped to project of me and a lot of scientists. In 2015, invited me and the World Health Organization as well. We would do a series of articles. It's been translated to Portuguese and Spanish. And what is working, how to promote breastfeeding. And the greatest success in terms of breastfeeding in the world was the example of Brazil. And after some time, we decided to do a new series. This you're seeing for the first time. It's a series of 3 articles, probably at the end of this year, maybe next year beginning. As regards formula, the industry of formula, why is it so hard to breastfeed? Why is it so dominated by the market? The second article is the commercialization of infant formulas and competition with breastfeeding, and the political economy of the industry of formula. How can we have this in the whole world and is inserted within the global context? So the first article is Rafael, is coordinating, you probably know him. He will talk more about breastfeeding, but the 2 others are about formula. I will talk now a little bit, because to do this article with my doctorate students, it is an article with prevalence and a series of bases. So we did an enormous work. We analyzed surveys of 83 countries, especially those that are of lower income. And we saw some from official reports, etc. So we have 113 countries, data from 113 countries, and it's a record. And based on that, we did some analysis. The first analysis, you can see 4 lines that goes from 0 to 100%. And the bottom part, it goes from the year 2000 to 2019. The darkest green countries are the poorest. I'm not talking exclusive. I'm talking about any breastfeeding, because the rich countries, they don't have information on exclusive breastfeeding. They don't value it and they don't have the info. But medium and low income countries, they have this information due to surveys. which is a DHS, Demographic and Health Survey. Well, look at the poor countries here. Almost everyone breastfeeds, but it's going slightly lower. These are medium to low, not as poor as the one above, but 90% breastfeed 6 months. But we can see that the medium high and the rich countries are increasing breastfeeding. This information from US, Oceania, Japan, Korea, and this is a good sign that the messages on the importance of breastfeeding are reaching the wealthier countries. Only 30% were fed 6 months, and now we have almost 50%. And Brazil going a little bit up, now almost 80%. When we look at 12 months of breastfeeding, of course, it's lower. Of the rich, the medium, and the poor are falling a little bit. In these countries where almost everyone breastfeeds for a long time, the importance of protecting breastfeeding in these contexts. Now I'm going to talk about medium to low income countries, because we don't have much information from rich countries. They don't value breastfeeding as much, and not even data. It's one of the few areas because we value more breastfeeding. And this is something interesting. 83 countries. It's increasing, but medium high, we don't have an increase. I think that might be due to cesareans. They do high levels of cesarean, over 55%, and this doesn't stop breastfeeding, of course, after the cesarean, but it's more complicated. Many hospitals are not ready and are not motivated. So I decided to focus a little bit here in these things that happened right at the beginning of life. This is interesting. This is more relevant to the human milk banks. The exclusive breastfeeding has increased. Once more, those medium-high incomes, they're receiving counsels, the mothers are being counseled, and now we have around 40%. And the poorer countries have a discrete increase, but they're at the 55%. Remember that the assembly, 50% of breastfeeding objective. It's not very, let's say, it's not very high. But the one that was revised was 70% of only breastfeeding. And at the rhythm I think we're going now, we will be able to reach it, to reach 70%. And part of this new series, we work understanding the food systems. How does that work? And what we postulated, and various authors as well, is that the formula, infant formula, is the first processed food in most kids. And a group from Pelotas as well. We have colleagues from England. So we're looking at what determines this dynamic of increasing use of formula. And I'll show you some data. This data in the rich countries, I only have sales info. I don't know what is the percentage. Despite that, we probably know it's quite high. So what are we observing? That formula is growing in the medium to high range, like Brazil, and it's stable in the poorest countries because it's an expensive food. Africa, Southeast Asia, regions that have some poverty. So it's very hard to consume formula. And people ask me, I don't have this data, but this is an interesting data. We showed that we're increasing formula in the same under 6. What is happening is because milk, animal milk that was given is being substituted with formula because formula is substituting animal milk. It's an interesting finding. But the industry is concentrating in the 6 months to 23 months range. This is one of the great market. And, and that supposedly allergy to breast milk was happening. It's not common at all. But 40% of kids from 6 to 23 consuming formula in medium to high income countries. It's a tendency of the industry that's concentrated in this group. There's not so much expansion of the market. The industry is falling in the rich countries because breastfeeding has increased, but it is also saturated. They can't increase much the formula in rich countries. So they're focusing in medium to high income where people can buy. Of course, they're not going to focus in Africa because supposedly there's less market there. And another thing we show in our article, these are 99 countries. Here in the vertical, how much breastfeeding happens up to 1 year of life. And down here is our indicator of formula. So those that have a lot of formula, they have less people. I made it very clear that the promotion of formula is a menace to continuous breastfeeding. And these results now, these exclusive, I think nobody's seen them in that article that I mentioned. And this shows the pre-lacteous. We know there's no need to give pre-lacteous before they breastfeed. The top is low income, the one is medium low, and then the medium high income is the third bottom line. So 35% receive some kind of pre-lacteous, and that's not recommended or necessary, especially if you have in HMB, you don't need that. You can feed that kid with human milk. But it is interesting to see that the richer countries use more pre-lacteous, but there are 2 types. Those based on milk, that's usually formula, and in this graph, okay, so the low income is the darker, the light blue is medium low, and the golden is the medium high. So the national is the income, so the richer countries on the left, right, on the left, and then you can see that the pre-milk formulas increase based on milk, but based on water, the pre-milk based in water, on water, especially poorer countries, they are administered especially in poorer countries. I'll put you a graph. You can see the difference, and water goes down, milk goes up. So, and what about Brazil? I like to thank Enan and my colleagues of child nutrition, especially Gilberto Boccolini, that gave me these preliminary results showing four, four times. This is a preliminary result, but we should have a report soon. 1986, when I started to do this research, nobody used this in Brazil. Only 2% uh, exclusive breastfeeding up to 5 months. Now we have 45%. There's still a lot of progress to go, but it's a great change. The work of all and reaching some higher rates. Like I said, it's a half full cup. We continue to need to fill this cup with human milk. Okay, so partial breastfeeding up to 12 months, which was 130, now it's 53%. So half of Brazilian children receive human milk up to the 12 months. That's around a half. I think this is our greatest success story. I know, I don't know any country that has gone from 30 to over half. It's 20, no, 30 and so year. It takes some time, but with a lot of work we managed.
So I'm going to conclude because we're also talking about COVID-19. The WHO invited us because of this paper here that we published on the Lancet. So let's imagine that COVID is going to go from the mother to the baby or to the child due to the physical contact and via the human milk. And so, via human milk, the evidence does not convince us. It's not convincing. There are fragments of viral RNA, but it didn't convince us. So, let's imagine that it goes from the mother to the baby. And so, we made many calculations and we said if there is the contact or the transmissions, we would have between 1,900 to 2,800 deaths of babies from COVID. But if the mother stopped breastfeeding, we're going to have between 134,000 and 273,000 deaths of children. At least 48 more. The mortality risk increases at least 48 times if they stop breastfeeding, mainly in average income and low income countries. And so our colleague from the WHO based his recommendation on this. Even if the mother has tested positive for COVID, breastfeeding is good because COVID, human milk is also full of antibodies against COVID. So, what do we have regarding good news and bad news? And so we are seeing now an increase in the total number of in the total amount of breastfeeding in rich countries, and we're having exclusive breastfeeding in all countries including Brazil. On the other hand, there has been a slight reduction of breastfeeding, continuous and continued breastfeeding in poor countries. There has been a growing use of formula in average income countries, and there is an inverted association between the use of formula and the duration of breastfeeding. So, formula truly impacts the continuation of breastfeeding. And there has been a widespread of the use of pre-milk formulas, and this impacts breastfeeding. And so our main message is the same message that we gave in 2016, is that in rich countries, in poor countries, in rich families, in poor families, in any circumstance, the mothers and the babies, they benefit from breastfeeding. I'm going to stop here, okay? If you want to ask me any questions or continue having a debate, I'm here at your disposal.